Hello there, friend. Welcome back to the Doing What Matters podcast. It is great to be with you. Great to be back for another week. And today I am going to be super transparent with you about a journey that I am on. I really haven't talked about it here on the podcast, but I want to talk about it today, and I want you to join me on this journey. And I am going to talk about something that I am doing later this year in something I've been prepping for a very long time. And that is, I am going to take a sabbatical from my business. Now, you may not be familiar with the term sabbatical, or if you are, you may be only familiar with it from the idea of professors at colleges and universities take sabbatical and are given time off, or maybe a pastor or a minister that you're familiar with take time off and get extended periods of time. That is really the only way that most of us are familiar with this idea of a sabbatical. Most of us aren't familiar with someone in the business world, an entrepreneur, a CEO, someone in a leadership position within an organization, taking a sabbatical. Now, sometimes in the nonprofit space, there are sabbaticals that are given, but the idea of a business owner, such as myself, an entrepreneur, stepping away from their business for an extended period of time is really not something that you hear about very often. It is pretty foreign in the culture, in the world, in the place that I hang out, for an entrepreneur who's growing a business to step away and take a sabbatical. Many people would think it's like a luxury. And it's really one of the reasons I've been a little bit afraid to share that I was going to go on a sabbatical. But those of you who know me well know that I am fairly transparent. If you listen to the podcast for very long, you know that there is not much that I hold back on sharing, because I think we can all learn from each other's journey. And so as I was pondering over this past week, a lot of things were coming up for me. I celebrated my 63rd birthday this past week on July the 3rd. I turned 63. That always brings up a time of reflection. It's at the end of kind of a 90-day period, usually around the end of second quarter. So I'm practicing what I call a 90-day reset, usually right around my birthday. It's also a big reflection time for me. I usually take a few days off around the holidays, and it's a reflection from the place of it being around my birthday. So there's lots of things that come together here in this first week of July for me that are just discernment and decisions and reflecting on life and where I'm at in life, looking back at the past year and looking forward at a new year. All of that to say, much of that was coming up for me in this week. Now, the idea of sabbatical has been going on for about 6 months for me. I actually started thinking about it, to be honest, clear back last spring, when our community of coaches that we have, our certified coaching community, read a book together by Ruth Haley Barton on embracing the rhythms of work and rest. This is something that I've been practicing, this rhythm of work and rest. It's been my saving thing in my life, I guess I would say, that I started practicing and looking into in about 2013, 2014. So I don't always love to share how many jobs I've had and what my backstory is, but one time I counted up that I've had about 42 different jobs or different careers. The longest I'd ever stayed in any one place was when I served on staff at a local church for about 9.5, almost 10 years in the creative arts ministry or creative arts pastor position. And I left that position actually due to family crisis and burnout and overwhelm. And I'm often have asked myself, what if I would have had a sabbatical? What if I would have stepped out? It wasn't something that our church practiced at that time for their staff, and I'm not blaming anyone for that. But I often think, what if I would have had the opportunity to step out for a few weeks or a few months? Would I have been able to stay? And again, that's part of my story. That's part of just God's redeeming in my story, so to speak. But at the end of that role, in the last year or two, I'd actually began a quest on how can I do life different. I knew, and I was desperate, actually write about it in the book that I released in 2022 called Do What Matters, Live from Rest, Not Rush. So I've been studying this idea of rhythms of work and rest since about 2016. It ended up becoming what I went into coaching for. And when I started building the coaching business that I have, that is now become a full-blown company with different people on our team and different tools that we use and all kinds of different things, that actually has been my story, is this rhythm of work and rest. And as Ruth says, embracing that both belong, the being and the doing. And this is always the quest I've been on now for over almost 10 years of how does this all come together? I actually created a whole process called the Real Life Process, which is a life management rule of life process to help people have this idea that you can have things that are important to you, and you can also be very effective in the world and do what you feel that you are given and called to do. Both can belong. And as I came into this, there still seemed to be one missing piece. I've gotten down the idea of living my life in these rhythms of resets every 90 days and what I'm doing and who I'm being. But about a year ago, I noticed that I still felt that there was a missing piece. And I had been reading books like John Mark Comer's Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, Ruth's book on embracing the rhythms of work and rest. I've been listening to her whole podcast series that Ruth has. It's actually season 18, where she talks about Sabbath and Sabbatical and all of those things. I'll reference those things in the show notes. But as I was being challenged about a year ago, it was about 6 years into this business and this company that we have called the Real Life Process. And we've been building this team of people that we have that do this kind of work. As I said, about a year ago, I thought, I think I need a sabbatical. If I'm really going to live this out, then I want to not only do a sabbatical for myself, because I can feel that my body, my mind, my soul all need it, but I also want to model it. Can an entrepreneur really take a sabbatical? Can they step away? Now, there are some people that I admire in this entrepreneurial space that I do know have taken a sabbatical, and I have followed them as they have done that. But I want to share with you how I'm doing this and what are the struggles along the way, what are the prep that I am doing along the way as I live into this. In 2017, when I launched the business, God has blessed it, and it is amazing the work that I get to do. But when I came to that place last summer, as I was reading through that book, I thought, I really want to look at this idea. I shared it with my team out loud last fall and said, I think I'm going to take a sabbatical next year. And it felt very scary to say that out loud, because once I said it out loud, I knew that I was then committed to actually doing it. So saying something and keeping it to yourself is one thing. I don't know about you, but when you say it out loud to someone else, it becomes real. So the purpose of this podcast is to say it again out loud to even a bigger world. I have said it to my team. I have said it in my community of other coaches that are certified in our work, and that we have a community that meets together every week. And I've said it in that community. I've said it to my circle of friends, of course, to my family, my inner circle, those types of things. But now I'm sharing it with you. And that's the purpose of this podcast, is to invite you on the journey with me as I prepare for sabbatical. My plan is to do a podcast about once a month between now and the time that I go on sabbatical, and to share the journey of how I'm preparing, both from the business side and from the spiritual and mental side, the being and the doing, I often refer to it as. So I want to share both with you because, as I said, I don't see this being done a whole lot in the entrepreneurial space, and I think it's needed. I think we should, and should is a big word, but I'm going to say should. I think we should be able to build businesses that we can step away from. Those are going to be healthy businesses. I just finished a series here on the podcast on the 7 P's of business, my framework for business building, as I help other coaches, other business owners, other entrepreneurs build out their businesses. I often refer to those 7 P's. If I have built those 7 P's well, then I think I should be able to step away. Is that scary? Absolutely. Am I totally there yet? I don't think so, but that's the journey. I love what Ruth Haley Barton, one of my mentors, says about Sabbath, which is the 1 day a week that I have learned to practice, leaning into a 24-hour period where I step away from work. And really what that teaches me as a believer is to trust God. It teaches me to lay down my work for 24 hours and trust that God has it, and what I've done for that last 6 days is enough. Now, it has taken me from 2016 till now to really, really practice Sabbath well. And I still don't get it perfect, but I do it pretty well. And I think I'm ready to step into this next journey of trust and faith with God to practice a sabbatical. So that's where I'm at. And what I want to do is share with you what I have done so far to prep. As I said, I just turned 63 this past week. And so I'm really looking at this sabbatical as, what does the next 7 years have for me? I would be 70 years old, obviously, at the end of this next 7 year span. And so I know that I want to really restore in 5 different areas as I go into sabbatical: physically, emotionally, spiritually, relationally, and creatively. And I want to do things in those 5 areas and look at things in those 5 areas and look at the future in those 5 areas as I think about from 63 to 70. And what does that look like? I want to really say, what does God have for me in each of these areas in the next 7 years? So this is what I have done so far to prepare for this. I have set the dates of my sabbatical. I set those early last year in the winter time, in the winter of 2024. And I have set those dates. And originally they were general, but just at the end of the last 90 days, back in March, I set the actual dates. And those dates are from November 11th through January 6th, which is about 8 weeks. What I've also done in my calendar is set out the week before, so November the 4th, as what I call a prep week to go into sabbatical, knowing that I'm going to need some time to shut down as I have read and studied from Ruth and from other people about sabbatical. I'm calling that the prep week. So that first week in November is prep week. And then the first week in January, that week of January 6th, 2025, is what I'm calling re-entry week, the week that I'm going to re-enter back into work. As I've studied about this and read, I think those 2 weeks on each side are critical. So altogether, there's about 10 weeks roughly that I'm going to be in this process. And I'm really getting serious now that it's July to know that I have about 4 months to look at sabbatical. Now, one of the things, I actually did a little mastermind session about this inside of my community back in April about sabbatical. And I was challenged a little bit to not overplan. Part of my personality is to plan. I want to be very effective and efficient. And yet, I think God is inviting me to plan to a certain degree. Not every single day, not all the things, but the invitation to these 5 areas of physical, emotional, spiritual, relational, and creative. These 5 areas, I think, are invitations from God. I've actually been on quite a physical journey in the past 6 to 9 months anyway, just with being diagnosed with an autoimmune disease of Hashimoto and just really working on my body physically and listening to my body. So that's already started, as well as some of the other things. But I really feel that these 8 weeks and the 2 weeks on each side are the right amount of time for me in this season. I joked and said that's 1 week per year. So I don't know if I get up to 14 years in the business, maybe I do 14 weeks. I'm not sure when I'm 70, but I'm spending July and August. The plan is really looking at my business and preparing my business and my team. We've already actually been doing that. I've set up the whole year, and my big calendar that I have on my wall is set up knowing that I was going to go on sabbatical in November and December. We're not doing any big things in November and December, and we don't anyway. So it's a really good time for me to step away. But I really want to spend the next 2 months preparing the business. And then I want to spend a lot of September and October preparing what I call the being side, my spiritual side, my mindset, some of those things to be gone. That's where I'm at right now. So the first thing I've done is set the dates. The second thing I've done is setting up how I'm spending the next 4 months and what my focus is on. I'm also rereading Ruth's book on embracing rhythms of work and rest, as well as reviewing some writing from Dallas Willard and other people that have done sabbatical. I'm actually going to talk to some people and have some conversations. I've already done some of those, but I plan to do a few more here in July and August. And then by the time Labor Day hits, my plan is to be done with all of that prep work and really start to prepare my heart and to prepare my mind and my soul for this gift of sabbatical that God is giving me and that I'm giving to myself. One of the other things, the fourth thing I've done is I have booked a long European cruise for Farmer Dale, my husband and I, and 2 other couples that are really good friends of mine. And we are all meeting up in going on a European cruise for about 8 days. We're going to take some time beforehand. That will be the first time I've been back in Europe since I was in Romania with our daughter when we adopted her and then went back to visit her family. And so I'm really looking forward to that. Dale and I haven't done a trip like that ever before. So we're looking forward to that. And I know that's just going to be a beautiful season from a relational standpoint that I am pouring into. So I've done 3 to 4, I guess, major things to prepare for this sabbatical. I've been practicing this rhythm of work and rest since about 2016, 2017, actually even before that, as I was a part of the Transforming Center and was introduced to these spiritual formational practices and had to write a rule of life, and then ended up developing the process that I have to help people with that type of rule of life. And I truly believe that if I hadn't begun practicing Sabbath, that I wouldn't be ready to do this longer sabbatical. And that my life would look so different. God has redeemed this season. Do I wish that I would have started some of this back in my 30s and 40s? Absolutely. But yet I do not regret how my life has shaped and formed me. You know, when I wrote the book back in 2022 and the book came out that fall, even now when I go back and read through those parts of my story and see how much I've grown even since then, I am just amazed how God just continues to work in our story. I do not have this all figured out. Actually, it's scary to think about and to step away, but I wanted to be real with you. I wanted to be authentic with you of where I'm at. And I have had this podcast since 2019. I don't know for sure yet what I'm going to do during sabbatical. I may ask someone to step in to the podcast. I may take a break. I'm not really sure what that's going to look like. That's one of the decisions I have yet to make as I prepare to step totally away from work. What is that going to look like? So that will come, and you will be one of the first to know as someone who listens to the podcast. But this podcast audience, however big or small that it is, I'm never sure. The algorithms tell you all kinds of things. But yet I feel very connected to those of you who listen. Some of you each and every episode and have for a long time. If you're brand new, welcome in. Welcome to my life of never really knowing, but always trusting that God has it and living into the trust that God has it. One of my favorite poems, and it has come to mind often in these last few weeks, even as I've been thinking about the sabbatical more and more, is the poem by Thomas Merton. I refer to it in the last chapter of my book, and I want to share it with you here in its fullness. And so this is often called the Merton Prayer or poem, and you can Google it. You can find it easily out there. But this is actually where I feel right now here in the 1st of July about these next 6 months of the year. And it says, this is the prayer. It says, "My Lord God, I have no idea where I am going. I do not see the road ahead of me, and I can't know for certain where it will end. Nor do I really know myself. And the fact that I think I am following your will does not mean that I'm actually doing so. But I believe that the desire to please you does in fact please you. And I hope that I have that desire in all that I am doing. I hope that I will never do anything apart from that desire. And I know that if I do this, you will lead me by the right road, though I may know nothing about it. Therefore, I will trust you always, though I may seem to be lost and in the shadow of death. I will not fear, for you are ever with me, and you will never leave me to face my perils alone." So when I think about this journey and choosing to step away, choosing to go on sabbatical, I refer and come to lots of lines in that prayer of, I have no idea where I'm going. I do not know if this is a good thing or a bad thing. I do not know where I'll come out on the other side of the sabbatical. And sometimes that alone scares me. But I do think that I am doing the right thing. And I think it pleases God that I am leaning in and trusting him. And that's what I want to do. And I do feel like that I'm following his will, at least for this season, for right now in my life, that this is super important. So thank you is what I want to say for going on this journey with me. I'll be checking back in every maybe once a month, every 3 to 4 weeks. I'll be giving you an update on where I'm at in the journey. And I appreciate your prayers. I actually covet your prayers as I do this and as I am able to share with other people that own a business and they're not a professor, they're not a pastor, that they can build something that they can step away from when God calls them to it, that they can rest at the deepest level of rest in whatever areas God is calling them to. And I hope and I pray that is the journey that will be beneficial for all of us as you're listening, as I'm doing, as we're doing this together. So that's what I wanted to share with you today on the podcast, is just where I'm at and what is happening in my life right now. And I have no idea, but I am grateful for the journey and what God has for me in it. I look forward to sharing with you more about it as we just continue to do life together. Remember, friend, that every ordinary day has an extraordinary moment. You just have to look for them and notice them and see them and sit with them. And I invite you to that. I'll be back next week with more from the Doing What Matters podcast. I can't wait to talk to you then.